building and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. Like the 200 people are here at the first Fine Homebuilding Summit. This is day 2, right? Day 2. Oh man. So, this is Senior Editor Michael McComb. I'm joined by Green Building Advisor Editor Brian Gonzalez, Carpenter and Educator Maria Klemperer-Johnson, Contractor Jake Bruton, and Architect Steve Basic.
Hello.
Thank you all for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. It's been quite a fun-filled day already. What have you guys, Brian, what did you decide is the most interesting thing you've come across here at our first Fine Homebuilding Summit?
I heard that name, I said, I'm glad I don't have to say that.
Well, I wrote it down.
Still,
Thank you. So what do you, well, let's start off with what are you doing here? So folks who've listened to the podcast for a long time know you. And they know you've left the brand for a little bit.
Yeah.
But now
that. So I got to find a little bit last summer, and I'm always thinking one time there, but I'll do it
so
again.
we're expecting a lot of additional listeners after this special episode.
Good. So then more recently I came back to town and to work on Mark Holiday retired. And so yeah, so I'm part of the team.
Welcome back.
And I'm really excited to be here. This is a very cool event that we talked for years. We talked about doing an event, doing something like this. And so I'm really excited. We finally have it off the ground. That there's so many people here.
Yeah, it's a great crowd. And crusty. These people have been really nice.
Yeah, these people have been really nice. So this is awesome.
Cool. And Maria, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and why you're here?
Yeah, well, I'm a builder. I was a builder. I've been running my own business since 2013, offering short carpentry workshops to women in my business. And then last year, at SUNY Delhi, which is one of the State University of New York. They're one of their tech campuses, and so they have a school of applied technology offering all kinds of programs, automotive, welding.
Teach there.
I teach residential construction, so I'm teaching carpentry. This year I'm teaching, or this semester, I'm teaching plans and specifications. I'm teaching a small business ownership class. I'm actually teaching a residential construction class in the construction management program.
That's a pretty tall order. How can you be good at all those things?
I didn't say I was good at them all. No, I mean, they're all things that I've worked on in my own business. In the spring, I get to teach a timber framing class, which is my favorite. I have a background in timber framing.
How will you teach that? Will you guys actually build something?
Yep, I taught it for the first time last spring, and we built a little 12 by 16 shed, timber frame shed, and the final for that class was the raising of that timber frame. We raised it in our masonry lab.
Cool.
And then sold it, and so it's a lot of our projects. Actually, Delhi is a great program. The students all do work on real projects. We have a new construction build for the freshmen. Their first semester is spent framing that house, and then the second semester is doing the finish work, and then in their second year they do 2 remodeling projects. So those are real projects for real clients, in addition to the lab work that they do in the labs.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a great program.
What have you learned by becoming an educator?
Being an educator has really deepened my understanding of the work that I do. It's something that I've always done, is think about, why I do something a certain way, but having then to teach it to somebody else, it makes you think more deeply about that and really analyze
your methods.
Your methods. What is it that you're actually doing? Yeah. And then finding ways to explain it to very different people who learn in different ways. That's been challenging, and of course, I love a challenge, and so. Sure. And then the other thing I've learned is that I'm working for a large state institution, which is new. I'm used to running my own business, right, where I get to make decisions and they happen right away, and now
you have some bureaucracy to navigate.
Now there's some bureaucry. Yeah.
Do you still have your business teaching
the Hammerstone? Yes, I do. Yeah. So I still run Hammerstone School. This summer we did 5 of our 2-day basic skills workshops. Teach the fundamentals of carpentry, the tools of the trade, how to cut with a handsaw. Then we moved to a circular saw, cutting plywood, cutting angles, fastening things together with both hammer and nails and a drill and driver, and they built a pair of sawhorses. So that's really the bread and butter class that we teach. We teach that multiple times throughout the year. Try to do a framing class, a bookcase class, a trim class, if we can fit those into our schedule in the summer.
Awesome.
I lightened the load a little bit this year just because it was my first summer. My first summer off, that's actually the one benefit of
being an educator.
Of being an educator is all of a sudden I had, the academic schedule. Of course, I filled that time with other projects.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm doing the Hammerstone classes in the summer and the Delhi teaching during the school year.
And I'm curious, specifically women.
Yeah,
in
for
your
Hammerstone,
business,
Hammerstone
yeah.
is specifically women.
And so, can you make a generalization about who comes and what they're interested in? Are they looking to get into the trades? Or they want to do work on their own homes? Is there a trend there, or is it all over the place?
That's a great question. So I had an idea of who my demographic was going to be when I started, and
Who was that?
It's a little too stereotyped, so I think I'll refrain from saying it. But what I realize is that people come from a wide variety of backgrounds. They tend to be middle-aged and middle income just because of the pricing structure. I mean, this is a small business that I'm running, and so it sort of prices out some people. Unfortunately, I try to run a scholarship fund, but that's hard to do as a small business. But in general, they're not people looking to get into the trades, which was initially my goal. And that's part of why I wanted to teach at Delhi, because I knew that I would be working with people who are specifically going into the trades. But they're a highly motivated group of learners. I mean, these are people who they say to me, I have been waiting my entire life for an opportunity like this, and it just really hasn't presented itself. If you look around the country, there aren't very many options for women to learn in that type of environment. There are some examples of places around the country, but not a lot.
And how's it going?
Fantastic. I mean, yeah, it's not I couldn't run it as my only business. But we have fabulous word of mouth marketing at this point. Like, people who have taken the class tell other people, and it's just sort of spread in that manner. So, I mean, it just amazes me every time we teach a class. I have a young woman, Christina, who does a lot of my she was my employee as a contractor for a while, and co-taught with me, and now teaches a lot of the classes on her own. Every time we teach a class together, we look at each other and we say, that was the most amazing group of people who just didn't know each other at all and came and made all these fabulous connections. And we say we could never have such a wonderful group come again. And then the next month, we get another 8, 12 women come, and they're just fabulous. And out of nowhere, they just, they have this common ground and this common desire to learn this thing, and they just really hit it off. It's a great group. So, and in our class this summer, we had one of your own. As you know,
Kylie took your class.
Kylie,
Yeah, and that's how we
took
were
one of
introduced,
her,
right?
Yeah. So she was a fabulous student. We loved having her.
And we also have a graduate of the program. You didn't teach, Matt, but we have a graduate of your
Delhi.
Your Delhi program.
Right. When I started at Delhi, that was one of the things that kept coming up, is that we have a grad at Fine Homebuilding, and of course for us it's a real point of pride.
Sure.
He's on our
Awesome.
on our.
I'd be proud of Matt too.
Yeah, he's on our. We have these program sheets that we hand out to prospective students that list our notable
alumni.
And, yeah,
He's on your notable alumni.
Of course.
Oh my God,
Yes.
I'm gonna tease him
Yes.
about that.
Matt didn't hear that, by the way. He wasn't
Jake,
listening.
thank you for being on the panel.
Thank you, sir.
Tell us a little bit about what you do.
So I'm a custom home builder and remodeler in Columbia, Missouri. Thanks for laughing, Martha.
Oh, no, I wasn't
about
laughing
that.
at you.
No, about what we talked about.
Yes.
And we're focusing on energy efficient homes, durable homes, architecturally significant. If it doesn't last because it lets water in or it leaks air, it doesn't matter if it's pretty. And if it lasts but it's not pretty, nobody wants to preserve it, so it doesn't matter. So they have to be both. And we do a lot of building sciencey nerd stuff.
How were you introduced to this wacky business?
So I grew up in the business. I grew up working
your
for
family?
my parents. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm second generation owner of the company. We talked this morning about.
Is your dad still in the business?
No, I don't think we could work together anymore.
That's always the next question.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I
Right.
think he'd tell you the same thing too.
Yeah.
There's no secrets. The first time that I cut rafters by myself and framed a roof, I was 14.
That's pretty awesome.
And it was like, well, you're not old enough to go to the lumberyard, so I'm going to go to the lumberyard. Why don't you figure out how to do this while I'm gone, and I'll be back in an hour.
Is that doghouse still standing?
Yes, it is. It sure is. Thanks, Steve.
And how'd you do?
I did really well. It was one of that and stairs are the thing that everybody panics about. And while I haven't cut the most complicated roofs in the world, I understand it. And I still work out of that little bitty book that has the two
The
pieces
blue
of
book
paper
that comes on the
in the front that
Speed
tell
Square?
you that where they're wrong. And so I still work out of that, and I enjoy that part.
Do you still wear a tool belt, or are you a business owner now?
So I've transitioned over the last 6 years from being on site all day, every day, and doing estimates in the evenings and the weekends to I almost never wear my tool pouch now.
Is that sad?
In a way, but we're not able to produce. The guys that have worked for me that are now subcontractors
Yep.
do higher quality work than I can.
Yep.
And so I'm really happy with moving to that role and
To
being the
managing
one
and letting them do the nailing.
managing, organizing, orchestrating, whatever you want to say. I'm happy to make that move and produce a higher quality product for our clients
Interesting.
than what I think I can do with my own hands.
And you also just transitioned your business a little bit. Maybe share a little bit about that.
So when I bought the business, it was myself for a year, and then myself and another guy, and then 2 guys, and then 3, and then in 2015 we had 15 employees. And I realized within 6 months of getting to that point that I was managing people and not construction, and I didn't like that. And I was dealing with personalities rather than construction issues or construction projects. And so then we scaled way back, and since 2015, we've had 2 or 3 crews depending on the labor pool that I could assemble.
And what are you building new homes or remodeling?
But we just transitioned out of that now too.
Oh, okay.
So since the beginning of the year, I let everyone that worked for me go except for one guy, and the goal was to just be the 2 of us and project manager. And then actually had a kid apply a couple weeks ago that found us through Instagram. I'm gonna pull a Steve, Jake.Bruton on Instagram.
That's Steve Basic Architect.
And he contacted us and talked about building science and talked about why he's interested.
So he
in
got
building.
himself a job.
He talked himself into a job that didn't exist.
That's
actually,
pretty cool.
yeah. And I'm really happy right now. So
That's cool.
I'm really happy with the 2 guys that I have.
And for the 2 or 3 people who don't know him, Steve Basic has also joined us today.
You can find me on Instagram at Steve Basic Architect.
Do you want to tell folks a little bit about your work?
Yeah, so I'm a registered architect that primarily deals in very efficient homes, highly durable homes. One of the things I wanted to mention about Jake is we've been working on construction projects almost seamlessly for about the last 3 years with Jake. And
You've designed homes that Jake has built?
that Jake has built and is building and is gonna build.
So Jake, what's he like to work with as an architect?
Our labor pool for architects in Columbia is fairly shallow. There's some good guys there. There's some good architects that we've worked with before.
Keep in mind, I was just about to compliment
I
you.
know.
So
I know.
I'm going to get back to this too.
I think that outside of the fact that we've become friends through this working process where we challenge each other constantly, I've never had an architect that was willing to listen, willing to change, and willing to tell me I'm wrong all in the same sentence. So it really is a good working relationship, and he's in my top couple architects that we like working with. So,
Steve, you obviously work for a bunch of clients, right?
yes, sir.
And is it all high performance houses? Is that part of your DNA?
Most of it. I mean, there's still a time where, the project might start out as a code-built house, but I'm always under the belief that my job necessarily isn't to draw a hard line in the sand. It's to take whatever project's presented and deliver it at a better quality than was initialized, right? So that even if somebody comes to me with a code-built house, we're going to scrutinize and question everything. And one of the problems is that homeowner education and even somewhat contractor education isn't as high as we need it to be in some cases, so that a little bit of education allows us to make the project a little bit better. And that, when the homeowners understand that this doesn't really cost much more, but changes the maintenance cycle on your siding or whatever the case is, that they're really open to value. I mean, that's the important thing, is that finding clients and working with builders that understand this idea of value and are striving to get the best product, not the cheapest product. And before I continue, I just wanted to, can finish my compliment on Jake. He talked about dropping the tool belt. The great thing about Jake is that he questions everything, right? So I probably talk to Jake once a day at a minimum, and it's usually starts out with, hey, I was thinking. And can come from either one of us about different projects, and that we really strive to scrutinize every decision and try and get it to a level of its highest success. Now, obviously, like any project, we have budget constraints and aesthetic concerns, and we have clients we have to deal with, so we can't just go willy-nilly and do whatever
you have to do what they want.
Right? So we have that, and one of the project is for his in-laws. And, his father-in-law, let's just say, has some views.
Is he an engineer?
No, he's not an engineer. He's just a gentleman with some views. And but he was really good. But I think we make a really great design build team in that we both really strive to push each other, because it really forces us to deliver the best product we can.
It's funny, Jake does. You mentioned Jake questioning everything, and I remember a few weeks ago, on maybe it was more than a few weeks ago now, but I remember seeing an Instagram post of Jake's where he's standing, if I remember right, he's standing outside of the foundation of a new home, and he's got the footing drains. He's looking down the footing drains, and he says, I always thought the holes in the bottom of the footing drain went down. He's like, but I'm not sure, maybe they go up. And I thought to myself, shit, I thought I knew something. I thought I knew where the holes went.
Yep.
They
If
go
Jake doesn't
down,
know
right?
where the holes go, which way the holes go, maybe I don't know anything.
Okay, so if we'll have this
I'm
discussion.
sorry to get on
No.
this side, but I've
So
always
I see it-
assumed they always
I
go
did
down.
too. I thought I
see
knew
it both
that.
ways. I think the answer is there should be holes facing down and facing up. So I think we're drilling extra holes, or we're finding a different product rather than just the V holes. Because if you face the holes down, you catch the water as quick as you can. If you're trying to mitigate groundwater coming
Right.
in. If you're trying for water above, the holes facing down can
You have to
still
fill up that whole thing.
But you can
Yeah.
get a silting event that takes care of the pipe before you've collected hardly anything. But if the holes are facing up, that silting event can be quite high inside the pipe, and you can still collect. So it depends on what you're trying to do, why, and I think that the perforated manufacturer makes the wrong product, in my opinion.
This is the second time my mind
You
has been
think that's
blown
the
today.
same?
So there is no
I mean,
product with the holes
problem
on
with
both
holes
sides?
up. The problem with holes up is if you have a very seasonal water table like I do in Reading, Mass, you have the potential to clog it.
You fill it up.
Right.
Halfway that you can't really get rid of it. I mean, the way around it is we just buy the one that's holes all around with a filter sock around it. Then we take the question out of the question.
Yeah.
Maria, have you had this conversation with a client ever about footing drains?
Not that specific question.
Okay.
No.
Did you think you knew how to do it like I did?
No, I didn't actually. I figured that it would be written in the
manual?
in the,
Manual.
in the
Right.
product description.
I'm going to ask my salesman for the plastic pipe manual next time I
Right,
go into
yeah.
the plumbing store.
They don't send that out with at our yard. They don't send it with the pipe.
I figured I would look it up on Fine Homebuilding. Actually,
We probably have a drawing.
Yeah. That's half right.
there might be two
Apparently-
articles.
apparently
Two
it's half
articles
right.
with
Revisit that article.
You can check my Instagram, but it's kind of wishy-washy on the subject right now.
so you don't come up with a definitive answer.
So you guys are probably a more diverse group than is ordinarily on the podcast.
Yep.
Because like normally it's 3 editors talking about stuff, right? You guys are all different backgrounds. What brings you to this event? And well, let's start there, and then we'll have a follow-up question. Okay? So, do you want to go first?
No, you should skip me on this one because I have to be here. even if I wasn't enjoying myself, I'd have
But
to
so
be here.
you had flight troubles yesterday. You could have got out of it. You could have just said, you know what? Geez, I'm sorry, I can't make it.
I could have. So I'm glad to be here. There's a lot to learn. There's a ton to learn.
There's a ton to
here,
learn.
So, yeah.
What do you think, Maria? What brought you here?
I mean, I've been reading Fine Homebuilding for as long as I can remember. I know that well, my dad probably got Fine Woodworking, which introduced me to Taunton Press. And
Sure.
then as soon as I started building, I was working for a contractor, and I wanted to learn as much as possible. I got a subscription. So, and as I ran my own contracting business, it's always been the resource that I go to to educate myself anytime I encounter something new, or want to know the best way, or see how other people solve problems.
So do you use the website, or are you still going to the paper magazines?
No, I use the website.
Yeah.
I use the search tool on the websites. But what often, I do still read the magazine, and actually what happened not too long ago was I read an article in the magazine about a design that I liked, porch railing design that I liked, and then within a year a project presented itself to me where that design would have been applicable, and so then I looked it up in the using the online search to find that design and then use it. And
Cool.
But no, so I have always respected Fine Home Building, and it's a resource for me. And so when I heard about this event, I was excited. I don't go to a lot of conferences, so this is a good opportunity to learn more and to network more and to meet some of the people that I see, writers and editors' names that I see in the magazine. So it's exciting.
How about you, Jake? You're presenting, right?
Yeah, so I'm done, so I'm not nervous about the day anymore. I presented my 2 sessions already on air
Can
sealing.
you tell folks what you were presenting about, for starters?
So the title of the talk was The Easy Path to Air Sealing, which is good for Justin Fink for writing that in and asking me if it was okay, because that was a good title.
Is there an easy path to air sealing?
I think so. I
Yeah?
think the stuff that Steve and I are doing together, it really is, between the stuff that he's figured out and the stuff that we've implemented, we're air sealing houses to half of what Passive House allows with stuff that we buy at the local lumberyard, and having the same guys that are building a house down the street build the house that's 0.3 ACH 50.
So what are your go-to air sealing materials that you're buying at the local lumberyard?
So we're a big fan of Huber's zip products, because that's a
tape.
big well, they're panel too. And they're liquid flash. So that is a large chunk of your wall or your entire assembly. Once you get to there, we're using drywall on our ceilings, on our lid, and then it's just a little bit of extra caulking in special places and paying attention to what you're doing.
Are you a big fan of the expensive European tapes like Ben Bogey?
I think that I would be if they had them at the lumberyard and they weren't that
Yeah,
expensive.
so that's the other thing he was talking about this morning, is you have to be able to buy the stuff.
Yeah. So I was just talking to a builder in the talk that I just gave, and he said, well, you can solve that by just keeping a stock around. I'm like, yes, I can, but I also don't want to have a store inside my
And the stuff is expensive.
inside my shop that has $3,000 worth of tape in it. Yeah.
And Steve, you're here presenting too?
Yes. I gave a talk this morning about design with the builder in mind, but basically just trying to do really good work that really has great levels of durability, comfort, health, energy efficiency, but doing it as simple as we possibly can. Trying to just be very conscious of our efforts, and is there a way, and this is a lot of what Jake and I talk about, is there a way to do what we normally do with the tools that we do it, but just employ a certain consciousness that we just care about it just a little bit more, that tips the scale into a very successful region for us.
Do you think this stuff that you guys have worked on together would be hard for an ordinary builder or a guy who wasn't as savvy about the issues that folks who are here might be?
Not at all. I think the first step is perception, right? So a builder like Jake that sits there and says, okay, I accept the challenge, let's figure out how to do this, as opposed to the builder saying, yeah, all that air sealing crap, it's really not worth the time, or yeah, I'll roll the tape, whatever you want me to do. But it's really the perception and the attitude towards the work that I think is the difference between success and failure.
And that entry attitude, I'm constantly trying to say, it's not in the code because it's unattainable. It's in the code because you can do it. They don't put things in there that are impossible.
Yep.
And then I always lean back to, I talked to, is it Gary Nelson, the guy in charge of Minneapolis Blower Door? And he explained to me that the first time that air exchanges per hour was in the code was in Switzerland, and it was in the 70s, and it was 1 ACH 50. If Switzerland had it figured out 40 years ago, I'm pretty sure we can get under 3 without that much effort.
No.
That's interesting to hear you say that. the other thing that's interesting about the code that I've been learning more and more, and Martin hit on it a little bit in the presentation that he just did, is that a lot of the building science questions that, at least the questions that I noticed coming in the most on GBA and before I was on GBA at Fine Homebuilding, a lot of the building science questions are answered if you follow what the code.
Oh yeah,
what the code suggests you do.
I was, grateful that you brought up Martin, because I sat in on that talk too, and Martin's a great guy, certainly. But the cool thing about Martin's presentation is that, he has a lot of answers, and he's a smart guy, and we can sit there and deliberate. But kind of the sad thing is that he's bringing up questions that were brought up 30 years ago or 25 years ago in my first year working at BSC, and we're still talking about how to ventilate a house properly.
Yeah.
How to air seal a house properly. What type of, systems do we put in there in the house, and windows, et cetera, and insulation levels, and all these things. It just seems like we have this kind of annual regurgitation of arguments.
Why are people not getting it?
On all this stuff. And,
Why?
And some of them are.
Go ahead, Maria.
and
You were
some
going
of
to
them
say
are,
something.
But that's the good thing, is that some of them are, because there's a lot of people in that sat in on Martin's and that agreed, and there were some questions that, assured us that Martin's conversation was extremely valid and that we are getting it, but we're still not all getting it.
I mean, I still run into builders who don't believe in the value of air sealing.
What do you mean they don't believe in it?
You can build a house too tight?
Yeah, you can build a house too tight. A leaky house is you need a little bit of air leakage in a house. There's still people who haven't, fully understood that.
I know, but
idea.
why aren't they getting it?
I don't know.
So
Let's ask them. Does anyone think we're building houses too tight?
I mean, I think
Oh,
it
we're
might be
preaching
because
to the choir,
of
I guess.
Justin.
So, but this evening when I'm speaking, I'll give a little tidbit. One of the quotes
We
I'm
should
going
tell
to put up
listeners
there.
you have the keynote address tonight.
I get the keynote address tonight. I'm going to talk about putting ourselves in a position for success in kind of a lot of arenas, personally, our projects, and what we do. But, as far as people getting it, one of the things I find is there's a whole other world on the other side of fear, right? That once we concede the fear factor and get rid of it and just say, okay, let me think about this for a moment, right? And instead of just throwing out this mouthy battle of, oh, you don't want to build it too tight, let's think about this for a second. Or we don't want to use European windows. Why the hell you want to get windows over there, wait 12 weeks and get these windows? It's if we sit down and really think about what we're trying to do, then I think we'll be much more successful at it. And we got to drop the fear and become solution providers instead of just trying to gain some ground in an argument.
I think that for some people, the failures of our initial efforts at insulation without a full understanding of building science, those
Like in the 80s.
Yeah, and I personally have worked on houses that are total failures that were built in the 90s or even early 2000s that failed because of an incomplete understanding of building science. So where we insulated but we didn't understand air sealing, those failures are fresh enough for some builders
They think that's the
yeah,
problem.
because the initial steps in building science weren't enough, and they see that failed. They say, how could it be better to do more? When really the answer is, we only got it halfway, and halfway wasn't enough. And so now that we're getting a more complete understanding, this is where we're going to actually succeed.
I think that's absolutely true, and innovation is happening fast with building materials,
Good tape.
and codes are changing, and so there's more to know.
But it's still, about
to
perception.
get it right.
Right? I mean, part of my success is the fact that working at Building Science Corporation it's my second job, but my first job was like a year long. So I was still that young kind of architect that didn't know what he was doing. And so I didn't know any better. So when Joe said, this is the way things get done, well, that's the way things get done. So I didn't have to change the way I did things. I just had to learn how to do things, right? And one of the other conversations Jake and I have a lot when we get together is the fact that we get a lot of people that come up to us and say, I can't believe you just throw up all your details on Instagram at Stephen Basic Architect, and just freely give this information. Well, we're out to help the industry to do a better job. Right. And we're trying to lift everybody up and say, listen, we talk about this stuff, but we can do it. We just did it last week. Jake, I was in Missouri with him last week. We tested a house at 0.30, like he said. That was, well, two of them, but one of them was framed by a framing sub, right? That with a little bit of guidance from Jake, he took it and he ran with it.
Wait a minute. I don't believe this. So, a little bit of training, come on.
So that framing sub is part of our transition from not having in-house carpenters. That guy learned to read a tape measure working for my company, Aero Building.
So
he
you've
knows,
done a lot of training, I think it would be fair to say.
Yeah, so he worked for me for a number of years. He understands my methods, but when he worked for me, we weren't doing energy efficient. We were just trying to do really quality work. And so he knows my mentality, and he knows what we're going to ask. And when we started the conversation about we're going to start having other people frame these houses, yeah, that conversation may have started a year ago before I was comfortable turning it over and not self-performing. But I printed the last time I gave a presentation on air sealing. I printed the entire thing. We looked at the plans. He had my written scope of work. I was there for the first 2 days that they started framing. I got to hear him argue with the guys that didn't work for me, that worked for him, about, well, you can shut up or you can go home. This is the way we're doing it. And they see the value in we're moving their framing company into a different market that is an income opportunity for them, and they're really motivated to do good work.
Do you guys share the blower door test with them so they know that their work was
yeah, so we actually
successful?
had a bet that sub said, how about if because we also had aero barrier in after we did the 0.3 blower door because we're trying to figure out what aero barrier means to our industry. And he said, how about if the aero barrier guys show up and they say we can't make it any better, you pay me an extra $500. And I said, deal, knowing that they would be able to make it a little bit better. But after we did our first blower door test and it was 0.3, I said, okay, you get half of it. If you can keep it below 0.4 once the windows are installed, because right now it's just envelope, you can have the other half.
So what'd the aero barrier guy do?
They got it to 0.06. Jeez. So 1/10 of what Passive House allows, which Steve and I were talking.
So like when you close the door of that house, does it make your ears pop?
Maybe.
If you can close the door. My guess is you probably can't slam the door.
You guys are going to have to start installing the old circular doors.
Holy crap. That's incredible.
The thing is, once you're below 0.4, 0.5, everything's the same. It's just how good's your blower door, how good's the guy running it, or how
you
good's
mean
the person operating
the blower door has its own leakage?
It has leakage and it has sensitivity issues.
Calibration issues, the way it was
Maria,
installed.
have you ever heard of a blower door test that ridiculously low?
Have I heard of a blower door test?
That ridiculously low.
Oh, yeah, no.
It's crazy, right?
No, I don't
What'd you say again,
I don't
0.2?
follow the statistics.
0.3. So we now have the last 4 houses that we built. One was 0.9 at final, one at 0.35, 0.3, and 0.3.
So I was on the phone with an architect out in California recently, and he was telling me about how he's experimenting now with energy modeling. He's new to it, and so he's been playing around with it a lot. And the example that he gave me about one of the things that he toyed with that I found interesting and informative and speaks right to airtightness. He had designed a house for a client, and the client wanted T-studs. These new thermally broken studs.
So folks who are listening and aren't familiar, we've had a conversation on the show, but they might not have heard that one. So it's like an engineered stud. It connects amounts to 2 cords with dowels, and then it's filled with closed cell foam in the middle, and it's meant to be a thermal break.
Right.
They have the naked T-stud now, too.
What's that?
They have the naked T-stud, where they don't
you
spray
foam it then later.
You can blow in your own insulation.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
So no, that's okay. So he was unsure about the value of T-studs and how it was going to help the performance of the house. So I think I believe he said that he had modeled the house at 0.1 or one ACH 50, and so he tried. He added the T-studs in, and he saw a reduction of energy use at he said a few percent. I think he said 3%.
It's probably very marginal.
And then he brought the ACH 50 number down by 1, and he saw a 30% reduction in energy at this model. So that speaks to how important this air sealing and airtight
keep in
really
mind
is.
Keep in mind that thermal conductivity is its own concept, but air leakage is like how much do I leave the window open?
Right.
right?
Right.
What were you going to say, Maria?
Well, I was just going to comment that I love these technical conversations, and when we ask why builders aren't necessarily like latching on to this, I think you have to look at who is going into construction. I look at who is coming into our programs at SUNY Delhi,
Yep.
and who our culture says should become a carpenter. Like, these are really smart conversations, and you have to be like it's not just anybody who's going to do energy modeling. You have to be pretty intelligent to understand that and figure that out.
And
I
have
think
some training.
Right, and have some training. And I think that we as a culture should think of builders in that light, where we used to think of builders as craftspeople, as people who had a lot of experience and expertise. And culturally now, I don't think we necessarily think of builders in that manner. I look at the students who come to Delhi, and they're the kids who have come out of the trades programs in New York. It's called BOCES. And we don't look at kids and say, you're bright, you're intelligent, you're like really committed to science and understanding things, you should go to a trade school. We look at kids and we say, you can't perform academically, you should think about going to a trade school. And these kids are fantastic. It's not to say anything negative about them, but we're not sending the best and the brightest to go become carpenters. And so then there's this mismatch between the people who are going into the trades and what we expect them to do. And I think that the answer to that is to say that carpenters should be intelligent, bright, hardworking, committed people. And it's not just, where we dump the kids who can't go to college. And that's actually what I see happening a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be you're passionate about this, so go.
Right.
Go do it.
Right,
That's,
right.
That's who should go.
Right.
On a
Go
broader
ahead,
note,
Jake.
though, excuse me. On a broader note, I feel like every conversation about where a kid's going to wind up should be that, not just you're good
yeah.
at at the
Absolutely.
trades. We have an in-house conversation. My wife and I both have a degree. My wife has a PhD, and our conversation is still, I want you to do what you're going to be happy doing.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
only thing that I care
right on.
about.
Right, and that any of those options are valuable. I know that when I grew up, it was not. There was a value judgment. You could go to a liberal arts school and get a degree, or it was there was not equal value placed on trade. And I think this is true in a lot of places. There's not equal value placed on trades work and other more academic or more tech focused work.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely.
And that's a change that I want to see.
I grew up in a
culturally.
trade household, and I was
Right.
encouraged to go to college.
Right.
Me too.
Oh,
And probably
to
for
not
that
go
reason.
into the trades.
Yeah.
Because-
or to go to college to come back to the trades.
Mine was go find something to do that's not working for the family business. And then, so I have a degree
Because
in
your dad didn't want to work
fine
with
art.
you.
I don't think my dad wanted to work with me at that point, no.
Yeah.
So I have a degree in fine art. I made a living as an artist. I have like a minor in art history. Like, I did everything I could to not be employable after I got out of school.
And I have to say that a lot of the really excellent carpenters that I've worked with in where I live, they don't, they have literature degrees. I have a computer science degree. People have all these different degrees and then fall into this because they're passionate. And that's,
Right.
Those are...
'Cause you love it.
I love it.
Because you
I love
have to
it.
love it,
Yeah.
or you don't do it
Yeah.
very long, right?
Yeah.
You go
Yeah.
find something easier.
Right.
It's a hard way to make a living, both physically and you have to
Yeah.
know a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff's out of your control.
and it's not really valued, I don't think, socially.
Not enough.
I mean, here, of course it is. Like,
We're
this
in
is a
rarefied air here.
Yeah, right.
But you're right. Most folks who
Some dreams are probably best not pursued, though. For the longest time, I wanted to be a talent scout for a circus, and I'm pretty glad that didn't come to fruition.
you just have to go to Montreal.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. Although I must say, being here, talent scout for the circus, working with contractors,
Oh, thank you.
nah, I'm just kidding.
What's perhaps most interesting to me about building is you get to do something different every day, and there's a new problem to solve almost every day. Because
Yeah.
someone screwed something up, or something got screwed up, or
Clients
there's a
are
change.
different, projects are
Yeah.
different.
I think that's why I don't miss like being an artist and taking
Commissions.
pictures and creating woodworking projects and stuff like that the way that I first did when I started in this industry or came back to this industry. Now my creative process is helping clients make design choices or thinking outside the box to solve architectural things. That is like a very rewarding creative process that feeds that part of what my personality is.
That has impact in the real
What'd you say,
concrete-
Maria?
Yeah.
That's a creative process that has impact in the real world.
Yeah,
Not
and
that
you get
art
paid
does
for
as
it.
well, but yeah.
And you can,
Yeah.
it's often tough to make a living as an artist, but you can make a good living as a tradesperson and have a creative outlet
And a very rewarding career.
and a very rewarding career.
This conversation has been nonstop the past couple days because we've had so many Keep Craft Alive conversations.
Yes.
And it's like, there are very few industries where you can point at something and say, that exists because of me. Those people have a healthy house. Those people's kids enjoy playing in that house, or they have a shower that they can get in and out of because I was there. Like, there's very
And
few
shelter
things
is
that are...
one of humanity's most basic needs.
Right.
Right? You need food, water, and shelter. And
Clothing.
what not really. If you got good shelter.
That's true.
Patrick's a nudist. Patrick's a nudist. Something you guys didn't know about him.
I think in New England, you usually need clothing for part of the year.
Or you got to stay inside all year round.
But yeah. I like what you said about problem solving, because that's one of the things that I've enjoyed most about becoming a carpenter, is like becoming independent by realizing that any mistake that I make, I can fix. And that's something that I try to instill in my students. I had a student make a mistake in our timber framing class, and I saw him make the mistake, and as he was making the cut, I could tell that he realized he was making the wrong cut. He was basically cutting the tail off a rafter, and I saw his face fall. And I told him, I said, this is such a wonderful opportunity. You just gave us this wonderful teaching moment, because if you hadn't made this mistake, we couldn't talk about all the possible ways there are to fix this mistake, and you would never have learned that. I mean, he would have eventually, but this is an opportunity to learn that carpentry is really about how to fix your mistakes. And you don't learn how to fix your mistakes without making mistakes. You don't just sort of sit around and think about all the possible fixes. You make a lot of mistakes, and that frees you up. I mean, I'm so much less afraid about making a mistake. And so I was glad that he did that, and we brainstormed, we talked about possible ways to solve it, and in the end, the solution was pretty easy. He came up to me the next day and he said, Ms. KJ, I think he thought I was going to explode at him for, cutting
messing up.
Yeah. And he's like, I just wanted to thank you. And I said, no, it was really a great opportunity that you had made that mistake, so we could talk about it.
You handled that so well, because I mean, any of the carpenters or my uncle I worked for would have lost his mind, right? And then you're
well, I mean, it wasn't a production job site, so that's
But when you're learning on the job and you make that mistake, someone's going to call you out on it,
right?
And it could ruin your day or your career, right?
Right. Well, and that.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to say that is one difference of being able to learn in an academic setting where, we are trying
the
to
stakes
get
are lower.
Yeah, we're trying to get jobs done, but I especially like to take the opportunity to teach with any moment like that. And then at a certain point, we're like, well, it's getting to the end of the semester. We got to get this timber frame done. So, there's a little pressure.
I've observed in teaching people trades work now is that there's been a complete sea change in regard to safety gear, and the magazine hears from people all the time via letters and emails about stuff they see that they think, and is that part of the job that you're teaching these folks to work safely and to know how to protect themselves and their coworkers?
Yeah, I mean, part of their curriculum is to do an OSHA 30 training. I mean, that's one of the actual classes in the curriculum. And in our labs, the safety is paramount. I mean, they wear hard hats, they wear safety glasses, they have to wear long pants and boots, and all of the scaffolding and ladders are tied off. So that is really something that we focus on in those.
So you're
classes.
not teaching the safety squint? The close your eyes?
Grow your eyelashes long, and
it took me a long time to come around to taking care of myself and protecting myself, and I catch myself doing the safety squint.
I'm not going to say I don't do that.
With my safety glasses on, I still do the safety.
What made you change, Jake? Because it's unusual for
I
folks
wore
who've
an
been doing
eye patch for 3 weeks.
What happened?
I just caught a chunk of wood in the eye. And then 6 months later, I wore an eye patch for 2 weeks because my 6-year-old at the time shot me with a Nerf dart.
So wear
and
your
so
safety
now we do
glasses all the
safety
time.
glasses for Nerf fights too, because we're
Was it
that.
a mega Nerf dart or just a regular kind?
Nerf battle?
Well, I didn't lose just because I took one to the eye. We didn't talk about where he was.
What was it? A little one or a big one?
It was one of the little ones with the suction cup on the end. So it was
it stuck right to your eyeball.
It didn't stick to my eye, but it was not fun.
That's horrible.
He felt really bad too. I
Sure.
felt bad for how bad he felt. But
Yes.
that safety conversation didn't exist 5 years ago even in my company. And now I have guys that put their gloves on when they get to work and take their gloves off when they go home, And we still run into, the other day we were on a job and one of our subs was like, "What are your hands cold?"
Yeah.
Well,
So there are still some of those guys, but they're fewer, and they're dying off, fortunately. What about respiratory protection? You guys take that seriously?
it's still a challenge to implement everything, but we're
I tell him daily to just tape his mouth shut.
The one that I have trouble
But
with.
you have to tape your nostrils too.
The one that I bump up against most, where people aren't complying, is the hearing protection.
Yeah.
And I actually find it physically painful to
Me too.
not wear hearing protection, but I constantly see people not wearing it. And I worked with a guy, if he was standing where you are relative to me and wasn't looking at me, I couldn't shout his name loud enough to get his attention.
He wouldn't hear you at all.
Yeah, he just, from 30 years working in a wood shop, just had lost that much hearing.
I didn't understand that until I read about it, and I never wore hearing protection until last year, and I had someone sent me a piece on safety, and I didn't realize that the danger with hearing is not the loud noises that happen once in a while. It's the constant sort of mid-level noises
Yeah.
that damage your hearing, and no one had taught me that, and so I always thought, like,
Well,
when
it's
I'm
just a
going to make a
circular
real
saw.
loud noise, I'm going to shoot this nail gun, I'll wear hearing protection,
Yep.
but I'm not going to wear it when the saws are running all day long.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that was, for me, that was an education thing. I just didn't know exactly where the danger was.
Yeah, but I'm pretty vigilant and still notice hearing loss.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it happens just
But
by
I am just
aging.
getting old too,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
And there was a rock concerts in my youth too. Motorcycles, all kinds of loud
Right.
stuff.
One of the other interesting things last week was there's a gentleman, not unlike the people at SUNY, that where does Matt Bloomquist,
Taylorville High School.
Taylorville High
Illinois.
School, and they're actually building a house, but he took his whole group of students and brought them down to Columbia when I was out there with Jake, and we had a little Keep Craft Alive get together. Matt Reisinger was out there, but this guy drove 3 hours with his students in a van to hang out with us for the day. And
Was that just a normal high school or like a tech school?
He's the tech and trade program in a normal high school.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. Yeah, that's
and they're
fantastic.
actually building a house now, and he puts stuff on Instagram, and it just the way things move so fast. He had posted some stuff, and he had a couple questions, and something wasn't quite right, and then I messaged him and said, just do this, and he's like, oh, yeah, why wouldn't I? But and he ended up doing that, but it's just this idea that we can have this kind of immediate knowledge transfer, as well as there's a whole bunch of high school students that I was standing in, one of the houses Jake is building, talking about building science,
Right.
which was really cool. That they probably walked out of there and didn't know what a perm rating was, and that's fine. But just to understand that moisture moves through a wall somehow it gets from here to there, and somewhere it's going to stop, and we don't really know, and blah, 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 and someday I'll figure it all out. But it started them on that learning curve. People always tell me, well, yeah, I don't know if I want to go to the summit because, I don't really understand this stuff. It's like, I tell everybody, we're all on a learning curve. We just got different seats, right? That's all. Every time I get an answer to a question and I think, wow, okay, problem solved. 100 more questions are now available looking for a solution.
I think the baseline is shifting, like what people, the knowledge that people now are thinking about moisture in building systems. People who never would have thought about it before. So that baseline is shifting. That just takes a long time for that change to happen.
It is, and there has to be either consequences from doing something the wrong way, or a reward, or some feedback that encourage you to do the right thing, right? I mean, people don't change if there's no reason to.
Well, and that's one of the things that Martin was talking about at the beginning of his talk, was that there's not always that financial incentive to build a better built house. You get the financial incentive to put in the high-end finishes or build a more elaborate house or a bigger house, a fancier house, but there's not always the incentives in resale value or clients willing to pay as much for a
good
higher
performing
house. Yeah.
So, time to pick a fight. Right. So, one of the things that I take exception to, and again, you talk about that, is I seriously take exception to when someone talks about, well, that's an energy upgrade. No, it's just a different decision, right? We have to stop thinking of this as, well, this is just a more costly way to do it. You might have a better outcome, but this is just going to cost more.
How long till I get that money
Right.
back?
How long until I get that money back? No, it's okay. Let's.
What's a
build
good example you're talking about,
Well,
Steve?
let's just build a piece of crap, and then I'll just pay on the back end to fix it.
And to heat it.
Right. Right. Or like a rain screen is a perfect example. I could take in 20 years, I can paint the house 3 or 4 times, or I can invest in the initial paint job and the second paint job and put a rain screen on the house and then not have to worry about it for 20 years.
You think that's a wash in terms of paint jobs?
Yeah, and it's a lifestyle issue.
You don't have to paint.
Right? I don't have to paint. I don't have to get somebody to paint it,
Yep.
but it's just we really need to start making decisions that aren't necessarily upgrades. They're just different solutions to the question. And I don't like the archaic approach of, well, this is an energy upgrade, or this is just an upgrade, or this is going to cost more, but we should be doing it. No, it's not, because the first question I always ask when people say, well, how much more does that cost? Well, what's your baseline? Well, let's build the crappiest house available and then measure everything up
Against
from
that,
there
yeah.
and against that.
So
Right?
is that
of
the
course,
buil-
everything's going to cost more money. You're building the biggest POS you can.
Right.
Steve,
So-
does the builder or the architect make the mistake right away by if a client comes to you, they don't know anything, they don't know what the baseline is. So is the mistake made when the builder or the architect offers them an option that isn't going to perform well? You don't have to offer 'em a house without a rain screen.
And it is a challenge, and a lot of it is builder perception, because I've been caught in the conversation of I work with a client, I design a house, we get a builder on board, he looks at the drawings and says, yeah, I don't do it that way. And it's like, well, this is, let me explain why this is a good way. And he kind of poo-poos it, and then a week later I get a call from the client. Well, Johnny said, that we could save 10 grand if we don't insulate the crawl space that way, and we do it the way he's always done it. And, so the builder has, me as an architect working with the client, building a builder or choosing a builder that's on board rather than one that's going to chop the whole project apart and just convince the client to do it his way or her way, that can become a real challenge. So, we all have to get on board. And to answer your question, I have had projects where, we do a certain wall assembly, a certain window system, et cetera, and then, we're over budget. So let's talk about how to come back. But there are parts of it where I say, we're not getting rid of those windows.
Right.
Right? We have to keep those windows. We have to keep some level of exterior insulation. Now, we can maybe not do a 2x8 wall. I'll concede we'll go down to a 2x6. Okay. We need to maintain our air tightness package. So as a professional, it's my job to provide the outline of the things we're not going to cut and the things that we can concede. And that's part of what makes this place so great, is that all the people that are here presenting and the people that are walking the halls all are trying to get that understanding of the ability to prioritize these decisions, right? Because everything we do costs money, right? There's nothing about it, but we want to make sense of the best way to spend that money. And
Oh man, I'm like, you. That was moving.
That's why he's giving the keynote.
Oh my god.
I think the comment that you're making, though, Brian, with the idea of, well, how are we convincing them that this is the way that we should be doing it? That was like my biggest fear from building code-built houses to doing anything more.
Say that again, Jake. I'm sorry.
The fear of everybody saying, well, how are we going to convince them to do this? How are we going to convince the
them
client
as
to
the
pay
client?
the client or an architect to draw it that way? For us, the first couple times we brought stuff up, it got nixed right away, and there was a lack of confidence and the ability to walk away from something, I think, on my part. And then
you were hesitant
the
to just
client or the architect saying, well, we're not going to buy windows from Europe. Why are we using the zip sheathing? That's an upgrade. Why don't we just buy regular OSB and then put house wrap on it like the neighbor's house? And then eventually, I got to a point where I was comfortable enough where I just said, this is the way that you build a good house. We only build good houses if you want us to be involved. And it's worked. I never thought that it would work without tons and tons of arguing. And at this point, it's just, this is the house that we build. and it's really good. And then from there, we can go from 2x6 to 2x8 or
Right.
I think that you have to say, this is the way we build, and this is a house. Your house is not really good. Your house is the way houses should be built, and the other houses are really bad.
yeah. I mean, that's
And it's hard to say that, and you don't want to.
Oh, I have no problem.
You,
I tell my clients those ideas are stupid. We're doing this.
and having worked for a year and a half on a 12-year-old house that was rotten all the way through, spent a year and a half renovating a fancy house, architect designed house, tearing off siding, tearing out studs, pulling off sheetrock, basically rebuilding the whole thing.
Because of bad water management.
Bad design, terrible water management, just all the problems that you could have.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, it's like everything that could go wrong was going wrong on this house. And there's part of me that wants to like pull out pictures of this house and say, this is what could happen.
Right.
If you don't build this way.
I think
And
that's a good thing to do.
It's a scare tactic, and I don't think that's always the best marketing thing. But and a lot
I
of
don't know, if
things
you see a composty wall, you're going to get like, okay,
Oh, yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want that.
Well, and the thing that struck me is that when I was working on this house had been built at about the time that I got into construction, and they were using methods that
you and I did.
Yeah, you and I did. There was like Tyvek wrapped into window openings and taped
That's
with
how they
Tyvek
told us to
tape.
do it.
And we,
Right.
we had no idea that Tyvek tape rots out, and who knows how long, but all the Tyvek tape was rotten. And they never said use a rain screen when I was starting to
They
build.
didn't even say back prime your cedar siding, right? You put
Right.
that right on the house wrap because it's plastic.
And that's part of what was going on in this
Yeah.
house. It was tongue and groove cedar siding tight against house wrap on sheathing, and
That doesn't
you'd
last long.
You'd pull that off, and it was just rotten right behind it. And so
We all have those stories.
Yeah.
I just did a renovation of a house that's 5 years old, right? It was the bonus room master suite over the garage.
That's always a train wreck, right?
A total train wreck. The room didn't know whether it was outside, inside, in between. It had no clue. 12-foot vaulted ceilings. I mean, Martin would have, I think, had a heart attack because it was a cathedralized ceiling with recessed cans in it. So he wouldn't have
You
made
might
it
as well
about
go the whole
2
way if you're going to
steps
build a
into the
bad
room
space,
before he
right? Why
collapsed.
go halfway?
But the interesting thing was they ran all the ductwork in the rafter base and then tried to deliver heat from 12 feet above the floor
Awesome.
in a room that had knee walls and probably had an air leakage rate of like 20.0.
And a garage under it.
And a garage under it. Exactly. So the floor was freezing. But the homeowners, they even bought auxiliary radiators and couldn't get the room above 58
The more heat you put in there, the more
degrees.
comes out, right?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
all you just induced the stack effect,
Right.
and you just threw more dollars out the roof and more cold air in at your feet. So you couldn't solve the problem. But 5-year-old house that you couldn't get the master suite, the owner's suite, above 58 degrees in the wintertime. That house was doomed from failure at occupancy.
Yeah.
That's criminal.
How does that stuff get through, Steve? Like, how does that make it through the process?
Yeah, that's just people.
code doesn't account for
Well,
idiocy.
code doesn't account, and you can't. These are the people out there that are just this is the way we always do it. You get a nice big room up there, and we'll slap it together. They squish some bats in the wall, and just have total neglect for any thought.
But wouldn't that builder, soon after that house was completed, heard from that homeowner who said, boy, you know what? Our master suite is kind of cold. Do you think there's something wrong? And what did that guy do?
Yeah, all the builder's going to do is, I know the builder, and he just comes back and says, I built it to code. It passed all of our inspections, right? We have all the R
So he
values
just
in the wall.
completely takes no responsibility.
But this is what I'm saying. So that builder's able to build that house for, say, $190 a square foot, whatever the X amount of dollars. And then I come in there and say, okay, you should have put, if we were designing a new house, we should put rigid insulation underneath the floor to keep the floor warm, an airtight assembly.
Keep the can lights out of the roof.
Keep the can lights out of the roof, do this stuff with insulation. And people say, well, that's just going to cost more. No, that's how you build a bonus room over a
You
garage.
have to do that.
There's
If you
a
wanna be
luxury
warm.
tax. It's not free space.
Right.
There's a luxury tax to putting space out in the middle of air and having air on 5 sides of it, right?
But the
There-
problem is that they can always find the builder who will do it for the
Right.
cheap.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
they come
that
to you
is-
afterwards
that's
and they
true.
say,
And they're
I should have
out
listened
there.
to you. And
But that's our job as professionals. I mean, I think I do a decent job of educating my
Yeah.
clients. If I had $1 every time a client said, what's triple glazed? right? I could probably retire at this point because they don't know. And we can't allow the clients to wag the dog, right? We got to go to them with our professional opinions and say, these are your options. These are the ones that I like. This makes sense to put them together in this assembly in this order, and let's just stop doing that. And we're never going to get rid of the guy that's willing to build it for $160
Well, and
a square
honestly,
foot, meet code, and then
you
drive
don't
down
want the
road.
clients that want that guy anyway.
Yeah.
I would argue, like
Right.
they are not the people that you want to work for.
Yeah.
The biggest problem, though, is that most clients don't know
What
that
they
that
want.
guy is a problem. They just think exactly what we're talking about, that, it's,
that you
that it's
guys
an
are
upgrade
trying
instead of the
to
right
get
way.
more from him than is warranted.
Right, and
Yeah.
we're also conditioned to go with the lowest bid, right?
Yes.
That's something
Yep.
that we're taught
Yes.
is that you
But
shouldn't.
I've also had clients where we get the lowest bid, and I say, listen, if you want to work with that guy, go ahead and work with him. You guys
Right.
have fun.
Yep.
I'm out. Call me and we'll fix it later.
Right,
Call me
not,
and we'll fix it.
not all architects have the same understanding about what the actual cost to build something right
Well,
is.
there's bad people in every profession, right? There's doctors I won't trust,
Sure.
right?
yeah.
So there's bad builders, bad architects that just do it. And, times are really good now. So time is our hottest thing, right? It's like I don't have time to think about this stuff. I don't have time to add that extra detail and do it. But the reality is we need to. We need to because we all have been in the remodeling business most likely, or taken apart a house, and we understand how bad those houses that were built in the 80s and early 90s or whatever are, like the ones that you
2000s.
just talked about. But we could drive down the street and see that house being constructed today.
Every day. It's rare to see one being done correctly with water management. I never see house wrap installed correctly. A reverse lap, stuff's blowing in the breeze. It's not detailed around windows. I feel like sometimes we're banging our head against the wall because nothing is improving.
Is the answer that the robots will do it right?
The what?
The robots.
Are the robots going to do it correctly? That's what I want to know, since we don't have the people to do it.
I don't know. Maybe you'll have a robot that's like doing a spray applied WRB, right? Like,
I think
that's my $1 million idea for the day.
the robot spraying.
Yeah, what do you think? Would you buy one?
I'm still afraid of robots. No, I think we talk about you don't want to sell the house based on fear. You don't want to.
Right.
But at the same time, I came to build houses the way that we build houses, and to working with Steve and trying to push the envelope, pardon the pun, based off of my own fear, because I regularly Google construction litigation. And
Sure.
I think that if you can convince your builder to start Googling construction litigation, then he comes to a different point of building real quick. It's just we need more people to be afraid. Like Mike Girton has Google alert for deck collapse on his computer. Mike is better than anybody. Is Mike in here? I don't see Mike. Mike's better than anybody when it comes to what the code says about decks and how we should be doing
deck
decks.
knowledge is
Oh.
encyclopedic.
And his is the same as mine when it comes to, it comes from I understand what the problem is because I'm afraid of the problem.
Sure.
Good.
Good reason to be afraid, right? A lot of money at stake.
Yep.
Court cases are very, very lengthy, and nobody wants to be there.
Yep.
Clients don't want to be there. You don't want to be there. Insurance companies don't want to be there. Only lawyers want to be there.
Also, your houses need to be worth more
Yeah.
than the guy who's not doing it right. They need
Who's
they
not
do,
gonna
and
be in
that's-
business when
they
you're
need
ready
to be
to
worth
sue him.
more, and that's a part of the equation that is going to be the hardest one to change.
Well, the other question that I always ask, and I'll probably ask it tonight, because nobody's going to hear this until after I ask it, but when I stand in front of the room of 200 some odd builders and say, does anybody in here have the desire to be the lowest bidder on every project? Do you want to be the guy that gets the job based on your price, or a girl that gets the job based solely on your price, right? And hopefully the answer is no.
Right.
But because we shouldn't be striving for that.
You think you want the job, but do you really? Right? I don't think you do. I regret to say I think that's all the time we have. I think we actually went over an hour today.
Oh wow.
Thanks to you all for being here. Thanks to all you out for being out there. And thanks to all of you for listening.
Thanks, Patrick, for
You're
hosting.
welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, Patrick.
Yes, sir.
That's Stephen Bazek Architect on Instagram.
Happy building, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Nice job.